I installed the drivetrain on this about 8,000 miles ago, and that included the front sprocket and the rear sprocket, a brand new chain, the slider, and a chain guide. And everything actually looks okay except the front sprocket is pretty hooked now. The rear sprocket I actually had to change out 3,000 miles ago because I tipped over and I bent the one I had on it before. So this actually only has 5,000 or so miles on it. And it's actually good, but I'm sure you've all heard that you're supposed to change everything together so that they all can wear in together. And to a point, I think that's true. If you only have 1,000 miles on a sprocket or whatever and something goes wrong with it, I wouldn't go changing my entire drivetrain. That makes no sense. But I'm just going to go ahead and change out everything. And by everything, I'm talking about the front sprocket, the chain, the rear sprocket. The Zeta chain guide actually has replaceable guide in it, and the chain slider. And the other two things to check on your bike are the rollers. You have an upper roller and you have a lower roller, and make sure that they're not grooved and make sure that they spin free. Mine are fine, they spin, there's nothing wrong with the roller, so I'm not going to replace them. What I'm going to replace everything with, I'm going to replace the chain with the DID 520 EVRT. This is the narrow chain. This chain has worked really, really well, and I think if you actually look at the chain that's on there with 8,000 miles, it really looks pretty good, and there's not a whole lot of slop in it. When we take this off, we'll actually take a look at it and see if there are any kinked links. I could probably get some more mileage out of this chain for sure, at least 10,000 miles. But we're going to change it out anyways and put another brand new one on if you guys are curious as to what the part number is. There you go, that's what I'm putting on. And we're also going to talk about, if this is the first time you've put this chain on, the fact that there's a little wear nub back here that's going to spray everything with aluminum filings. Don't worry, it happens. I'm going to show you where that is. We're going to change the rear sprocket. So this is the SuperSprox stealth sprocket. So it's aluminum in the middle, it's steel on the outside, and I have a 52 tooth sprocket on it now. I gear my bike down so that I can pull my adventure load around. I'm more worried about that than I am top speed. My bike will still do 90 plus miles an hour, and honestly on the highway, you know, the speed limit's 80. If you're pushing 90, awesome for you. I'm not a fast guy. I'm going to actually replace it with a 53 tooth as an experiment. I don't know if I'm going to like it or not. It might actually be too much low-end grunt. I might not be able to keep the front wheel on the ground, but hey, whatever. And I'm going to replace the front sprocket with an OEM sprocket with rubber damper, because when I originally changed the front sprocket, you couldn't get sprockets because they resplined it and nobody was making them yet. So I ordered the OEM 13 tooth sprocket. And as this was shipping, Renthal came out with a front sprocket for the CRF450L. So I ended up with two sprockets, and I put the Renthal on, and it's worked great. It's the one with the mud grooves in it. It's dished out so that the mud can slide out of it. The OEM obviously doesn't have those grooves in it at all, but I have this, so I'm going to put this one back on. So that's the OEM front sprocket, and then here's the OEM chain slider. Here's the Zeta replaceable guide that's going to go right in here. So there are the parts that I'm going to replace the parts I already have on. Everything I've been using has worked really well. I have no complaints. So Real quick, let's talk about tools that you might need. You're going to need a chain brake. The DID chain comes as a 120 link, and your stock gearing on your bike is going to be 116 links, so you're going to have to knock 4 out. Now, that's going to change depending on what your gearing is, so don't get carried away with that number just yet. What we're going to do is we're going to get the sprockets replaced and the slider and do your rollers, do all that other stuff first, and then we're going to put the chain on and see exactly how many we have to take out. And as we're doing this, we're going to keep in mind that you're going to want your chain adjustment slid not all the way front. You want a little bit of wiggle room in there, but you want to have it pretty far front, so as your chain stretches, you got room to move it back. We're going to set all that, and then we're going to cut our chain, and you're going to need a chain brake. I think this is a Motion Pro chain brake. I'm not even sure. Just go on Revzilla, go on Rocky Mountain ATC, go down to your dealer would be awesome, and tell them what you're doing and what you need, and they'll hook you up with a chain brake. And you're going to need a file to make life easier, and I'll explain that too. Otherwise, it's all the normal tools that you have sitting around or that you should have in your tool roll in case you need to change your rear tire. All right, that's enough of me yakking. Let's get the rear wheel off so we can get the sprocket off, and we'll start pulling this thing apart, okay? Okay. All right, step one is going to be to get your bike up in the air so that you can take the back tire off. Once you got that and you're pretty happy the way it is, we're going to loosen up the front sprocket first. We're going to pull the guard off. It's a 12mm bolt, and you can get one of those wedges that you stuff in here so that when you turn it, right, your bike's going to try to turn forward. All I usually do is, and the reason we're doing this first is I just go on the other side, step on the back brake, and then bust that free. Back brake, get in there, pop it, and then you're good to go. That's all. Next, with your 10 and your 12, you're going to loosen up your chain tensioner bolt, and you're going to run it pretty far forward. Do the other side. That big 32mm aluminum wrench you bought to throw in your kit, now's a great chance to make sure it actually fits and works, right? All right, let's stick with the rear sprocket for a little bit. This one actually looks really good. Like I said, it's only got a couple thousand miles on it, but we're going to change everything together. So this has got to come off. One of the biggest things people do that they don't understand is people start wrenching on these bolts, and they are bolts, but they have nuts in the back, and you've got to take the nuts off first. Okay? Don't forget to do that, or these things will never come out. All right, so we're going to grab our 14mm and pop those nuts off. if I can get to them. Gently, so you don't smash your hand into the sprocket, because that hurts. 14 millimeter nut in the back and a 6 millimeter bolt in the front. And there you go. All right, and here's my experimental SuperSprox 53 tooth, which I've got a bad feeling is going to be too big, but let's find out. So clean this off a little bit, and then I'm going to reuse the bolts. Some people recommend you change them every time. Whatever, I'm just going to reuse them. Again, it's pretty obvious which way they go on, right? One side's countersunk, the other side isn't. I got everything on by hand. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to snug them down with the Allen in the front, and I'm going to try to do the old star pattern. It's not really snugging, just kind of pulling it in, right? So this one, while we're getting these bolts started, just a quick word. Just because everybody's running whatever tooth sprocket they're telling you to run doesn't mean that's necessarily for you. Why don't you go ahead and put some miles on the OEM sprocket before you decide that you need to go faster or slower, and give it a try. Just plain steel sprockets like this are pretty cheap. This is like 40 some odd bucks. It's not bad. These things are kind of expensive at about 100. It hurts when you bend them. Before you go changing everything, try the OEM stuff and wear it out a little bit anyways. There's a reason the Honda engineers chose that sprocket. See if you can figure out what it is before you change it. All right, everything's on and snug. Now we're going to go back and we're going to torque these down. The nuts get torqued to 24 foot-pounds. I do not have the adapter for a torque wrench that I can get on the nut from back there, so we're going to call it 2 Ugga-Duggas. So again, you're going to torque them down in a star pattern. Okay? That's it. All right, so the new sprocket's on. We're going to get this tire out of the way. So on your chain there should be a master link. If you have the stock chain, it's going to be a pressed on link, in which case it doesn't matter. What you're going to do is you're going to decide where you're going to break your chain at. Mine, because it's an aftermarket chain, has a master link, which I am completely unable to find at the moment. There it is. Okay, mine has a master link, which looks like this. It has a clip style. Some are going to look more like a regular link. There might be a slight difference in how the ends are peened over. If you have one of these type, what you're going to need to do is either get your chain brake and just force it through, or like I like to do is take a file and take that down to about even, right? And that way when you press it out, it presses out much, much easier. If you have a stock chain, that's what you're going to do. You're going to try to grind off that little peened over section right there, and then use your chain brake to push that link out, right? I don't. I have a master link, so I'm going to pry this off, and then with a small screwdriver, I'm just going to try to pry that plate off, back and forth until that comes off. Okay? Okay, so there's master link. That's off. And then try not to get my own elbow in my way. Just back and forth. Back and forth. So if I don't toast this chain too bad, right? Remember I said it's actually not that bad off. I can reuse it just in case I ever break my new one. Now here the trick is just little movements. Don't just try to pop one side off and not the other. It'll come off crooked. And then you'll bend the pins. Oh, there we go. So there's a plate. And then your O-rings. I'm going to save all of these in a little baggie somewhere. The new chain, just in case you're wondering, the new chain is going to be too long, so I'm going to have to take out some links. Right? If you're wondering how to use the chain break to break your new chain, I'm going to show you when I do this chain. It's the same process. There's almost no difference. Okay, so here's the old chain. I'm going to set this aside. While I have the chain off, we're going to finish taking off our front sprocket with a 12. There's no trick in taking this off, putting it on. There's a trick. I'm going to show you this. So it comes off just like this, right? You've got a washer that says outside on it, and then underneath is a cup washer or a spring washer, right? And that basically, when it goes against your sprocket, provides some tension pushing in on it. So that's the way it has to go back together. And you'll see if when everything's sitting in there, these two things actually lock together. So that's off. Got a little bit of rust in the back, ain't no thing. So here's the old one, and here's the new one. And I want you to look. Can I get in there real close without this going all wonky? Can you see how they're kind of hooked? Right, that's 8,000 miles of carrying too much weight. As the chain spins forward and it pulls, right, it's pulling the bike forward, it wears the front side of each tooth. So that's what it looks like here. And that's actually, I mean, you could still get a couple thousand miles out of that if you wanted. And then this is what the new one looks like. Also, when you look at this, there's a thick side and a more flat side. The thick side goes out. Thick side goes out, because it will go on backwards. Except if you do that, then the cup washer falls down in this little slot. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to sit on this face. So just remember that. Thick side goes out. Remember I told you about the little wear nub that when you put a slightly thicker chain on than the stock one, and the stock chain is pretty thin. It's a pretty light duty chain. The 520 that we're putting on now is a much heavier, beefier chain, and it'll last way longer. But there's this little aluminum nub that sticks out, and what happens is your new chain is going to be thick enough to wear that away, and you're going to get little aluminum sparkles all over the place down here, unless you go in and wear it away yourself with a file or something. Okay, so just be aware, when you see the sparkles, that's what it is. It's this thing wearing away. If you are a great believer in anti-seize, the bolt that holds the front sprocket on is a great place to put some. Also, there's a bearing right here that gets exposed to a lot of stuff, so I like to put a little schmutz. Y'all know what schmutz is? Okay. A little schmutz around that bearing, and I'll clean that up here in a second. And then anything that happens to end up on the spline is just extra waterproofing. Okay, so that's all ready to go on, but before I do that, just to make life easy for myself, I'm going to trade out the chain slider. I got the Honda OEM chain slider. Ask me where I got it from. Oh. Actually, I think I got it from Partzilla. And so far, everything seems to wear out at about the same pace, except that DID chain. That DID chain, and we're going to compare the two chains here in a second. Compared to the stock chain, that thing is really nice. When I used to race, I used RK chains, and they did just as well too. I'm not recommending anything other than get yourself the right size. 520 narrow always works. This comes in really handy for changing the adjustment on your front forks when you can't get a regular straight bladed screwdriver underneath your handlebars, especially if you have risers or anything that's put them in a new position. All right, there's the old one. See, it's actually not that bad. I probably could have let that on for a little longer. Well, Partzilla apparently sent me the wrong part. So all that talk I just did about changing this out, I'll be putting this back in. Thanks, Partzilla. So the chain slider is back on, and remember I said my rollers were good. I want you guys, don't forget to inspect them. All right, make sure they spin, there's no grooves. And then go down and look at the bottom one. My little drain plug, right? And spins pretty good. I just cleaned that a little while ago. We're going to put the front sprocket back on. And remember, the tall side goes out, faces out. And sometimes the splines line up real easy. Sometimes you gotta mess with it. Oh, there we go. Yeah, buddy. So that goes on. And then our bolt, a washer with a little groove in it, and then our cup washer, spring washer. The spring washer sits in that groove just like so. Okay, notice it says outside on the outside, and everything's centered nice. Now, I'm just gonna snug this down because I can't torque it just yet, right? Because otherwise, even within gear, you're just gonna turn the motor over. We're just gonna snug it, but we're not gonna forget to torque it later on, okay? So the next thing we're gonna do is we're going to replace the wearable part on the Zeta chain guide. Honda does the same thing. You can get the rubber insert part and just replace that, okay? There's the back part. So there's the difference. That's pretty well worn. It's just about to come out the bottom, but it's kind of soft plastic anyways. But anyways, definitely ready to go. So there's the back. Goes on like so. Now, if you forget to run the chain through here, you can still pull all this apart, right? This actually comes completely apart so that if your chain was already on, this would go up over your chain, this would go inside, and then it could all get bolted back. So if you don't run the chain through there, it's all good. That's all the wearables. So now we're gonna go compare the new chain and the old chain and see how much the old chain has stretched, okay? Here's the old chain. here's the new chain. I can tell you that the old chain looks really, really good. There are no frozen links. Everything moves nice. It's not overly stretched. I really did not have to change this out. Again, I did it just so I could change the whole system and so that you and I could spend 10, 15, 20 minutes talking and drinking coffee. You can see if I line these links up at the beginning of the chain back here, right? You see how much longer it is down here at the end. Not much. It's only about, I don't know, not a quarter of an inch, maybe 3/16. And that's just me eyeballing it. So you can definitely see that the chain is stretched, but if a chain is bad, it'll be longer. And the other thing it'll do is if when you, I don't know if that's going to show up on the video. Can you see that it's getting longer and shorter, right? And the new chain doesn't, you can't feel it move. This one, when I pull it apart, I don't think it's going to show up on the video. I can actually feel the links pull apart. There's like a definite, not a clunk, but a clunk to it. Again, this chain is perfectly serviceable. No kinks. It doesn't bend too far when I bend it. Here's a new one. It bends a little bit more, right? So as the pins on the insides wear, this will bend more and more and more and more, and et cetera, et cetera. This chain is actually really, really good, but that's besides the point. We're going to change it out anywhere. Oh, well, I'm thinking of it. The other thing I want you to notice is see how the links have gone flat on top? That's wear from running through the chain slider, and the chain guide will wear those off. And you see the new chain, right? Everybody's perfectly round. Honda will tell you to measure this distance, and when it gets under a certain amount that you have to change your chain out. But I want you to keep in mind that's for the stock chain, and this chain is much heavier, much more burly than the piece of crap stock chain that Honda puts on their bike. All right, let's get this on and get it to length, and then I'll show you how to cut it. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the rear tire back on. We're going to run the adjusters all the way in, so we've got lots and lots and lots and lots of room to play with. And then we're going to thread the chain on and figure out where we need to cut it off at, okay? So while we're putting this back together, we're gonna clean out whatever dirt we can out of the dust seals. Gonna get some red tacky grease and smear it in there. Again, it's just gonna help it waterproof everything. And hopefully if any dirt does get inside the dust seal, it'll get stuck in the grease before it gets to the bearings. I do that on both sides. And then clean off the little spacers because they're always crusty. There's one. Clean off the backside. And then I'm going to take the axle and do the same thing. I'm going to clean it off and then put a little bit of grease on it just to help it slide in through, and also to help seal everything between here and there. Now it should seal up between all the washers and whatnot, but just in case, again, a nice little bit of grease catches dirt and keeps it from getting in anywhere else. All right, all cleaned up. I want you guys to take note. I had some questions about this, right? You have your blocks, right? One block has a little groove section in it. That's where your axle goes on this side. And it's super important, and I've had questions on this. People put it in like this and not line that up, right? That keeps your axle from spinning when you're tightening this side. It won't do one of these. And if you do this, if you're not careful, you can smash the crap out of this and you can bend the edges of the axle. You're more likely to smash the crap out of this because it's just aluminum. Doesn't matter which side is up, they both have the same lines on them. But this does matter, okay? So when you put that together, make sure it goes in like that. So the order everything goes in, the same order it came out as. We're going to stuff the tire in there, which is always a treat. If you go in at an angle, you can usually clear your brake caliper on one side. Roll it in, try not to lose your spacers because they always want to fall out. And then guide your disc, your brake disc, in between the brake pads. All right, that's pretty much all there is to it. You're going to take your axle with the flat-sided side on the sprocket side, right? Make sure all that goes in. Send it through to the other side. And then line all this up so that it looks just like that. So everything nests. The axle sits inside the block sits inside the end of your swing arm. The other side is the same way, right? You're going to put the block on, then this washer, then this nut. Grab your 32 millimeter. This nut should go on just tight enough. See how much I can move the blocks pretty easy? Right now that's fine because I'm going to be moving the tire. There we go, that's good. Right? It's just tight enough that it won't let the wheel cock itself too far off, but I can still move everything. Awesome, there we go. Now we're ready to put the chain on and figure out where we need to cut it at. All right, so here's the new chain. Remember, I want to remember to feed it through here because I didn't do that earlier. Oop. So, remember this is a 120 link chain and stock is 116. So as you're looking at it, you can see there's only 2 links off, but I'm also at the back end of the adjustment, right? That means that when this chain stretches, and it will, they all do, I will run out of adjustment back here. So what I want to do is to move the wheel forward if I can. See if I can make it another link. See if I can get another link out of this. There we go. So now I have 3 links to cut off. 1, 2, 3. So now I can take off 3 links. Now this sprocket is 2 teeth too big. So even if I had only just 2 extra links, I would be super happy with that. But 3 links seems to be okay. What I am going to find is, I don't know if you could see that, because this that thing, because the sprocket is so much bigger, it's actually already rubbing on the chain guide pretty significantly. That's crazy. All right, but I'm pretty happy with that. Everything's moving. I can tell you that the chain guide is going to wear really, really fast because of how hard that kink is. It's going to wear this part in the back right away, absolutely right away. What we're going to do next, now that all this is pretty much lined up, we are going to break the chain right here at this link, right? And then our master link is going to go between these 2 here. Does that make sense? Nod your head if that makes sense. Okay. step one of breaking the chain. So I want to break it on this link on this plate. Remember I told you if you grind this pin down, it comes out a lot easier. So I have a file. I think the last time I used a grinder, I don't know that everybody has access to a grinder. So let's just take the next half hour and grind the end of this pin off right here. Or file the end of this pin off right here. Okay, so I didn't grind like the whole thing flat. I just took the edges right around the pin off. Definitely keep track of where all your metal filings are going, and we're going to clean it up before we finish everything. Here's your chain brake. So it has two spinny parts. It's got the inner spinny part, right? It's got the actual pin itself. And you also see that, so one side's a pin and the other side has a hole. So the idea is this goes onto your chain. Now you see how that fits over the pin, and then this end goes over the other pin to hold it in place, and then this pin drives the pin out the other side, out the back side. Okay? Does that make sense? See how it actually fits good? But you need to have this tight. You need to have this outside one tight where that pin will bend and go all over the place. This keeps this from screwing up, okay? Okay, so we're going to set this back part over the pin in the back. Then we're going to screw the outside one down until it covers the pin in the front. Now we're going to turn this in until it pushes the pin out the back side. So torque this down, get her snug, and then try not to let everything twist around. It's just going to mess up your chain. Okay? And there you go. So back this off. Oop, and then the pin just fell out. Oh, and I lost my O-rings. All right, so there's the pin we just pushed out. And the O-rings that were part of that link, I caught one of, oh, there's the other one, it's stuck right there, right? And that leaves us with a place to put our master link. And the master link should be included with your chain. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to put the master link in. Now, if you went with a rivet on or a press on or a my brain just shut off. With the kind you actually have to spread out, you're going to need a different tool to actually rivet the top, to actually peen the top over. A chain brake is made to break chains. It's not made to actually peen that over. So you're going to need another tool. Here's the new master link that came with this chain. Always, always, always have a spare one of these. You're going to see in it is the link, is the plate, is the clip that holds everything together, a little packet of goo, of grease, and then your O-rings, okay? So there should be 4 O-rings. So this goes on like so. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set that down for a second, And I'm going to take the little packet of glue, and my master link is going to go on from the back so that the clip is in the front so that we can see it. So what I want to do is I want to take this and get it so that I can squeeze the grease out just a little bit. I'm pretty sure grease is a carcinogen. Okay, so I'm going to take the grease to where I can just squeeze some out, and I'm going to fill up the holes in the back here with grease. I'm going to get them both full. You can't see it, but the grease is starting to come through here. We're going to take our master link. We're going to put 2 of the O-rings on. Now, it doesn't matter if it's a clip-on style or if it's a press-on or a rivet-on. It's all the same. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to put your O-rings on that's going to hold that grease in, and then you're going to finish that grease's journey out the other side, right? And just slide your master link on. But the idea is that both those pinholes are 100% filled up with grease. Okay, next we're going to put our O-rings on the front side so that all the grease inside those pins stays there. There's one O-ring, there's the other O-ring. Nice. And now for the fun part. Here's the plate for the master link, and that's just going to go over your pins. Dirt on my hands. And that needs to go on pretty evenly, right? You can't, like when you pried it off, a little bit on one side, a little bit on the other side. Same thing goes for this. A little bit on one side, a little bit on others. Vice grips work pretty good. But again, we're not trying to push the pins, we're trying to push the plate. There you go. And not only are you trying to push the plate, but you're also trying to squeeze that O-rings together. So it does take a little bit of force. And you're just going to put it on far enough until the groove for your master link comes out far enough that you can put it together, right? Oh, I think that was it. Here we go. Now, it should stay. It shouldn't just pop back off. There's actually a little bit of press fit action going on there. And then, right, there's a front and a back to this. This is the back side. This is the trailing edge. So as the bike goes forward, oh, and I can't turn this, as the bike goes forward, we want the trailing edge to go backwards. And there you go. Okay, we got the chain on. Next we're going to set the tension. And while I have this on, I'm going to give this another, I haven't forgotten about this. I just haven't been able to really torque on it yet. And now I'm just going to get it snugged down pretty good so that it won't move. And now we're going to set the chain slack. In the book, it recommends that your chain slack be between 1 inch and 1 3/8 inches, 25 to 35 millimeters. And that's the whole swing, right? So if your chain only goes to here and it goes up to here, that's here. Right? If your chain hits bottom, you don't actually know what the bottom is. You with me? So right now our chain slack is pretty big. Right now we have at least over 2 inches, right? If you take the little sticker off, just remember that where your mud flap comes down is halfway between the pivot points, which is where you want to check your slack at, and it's right here. On mine, you'll see I have these little tick marks. This is 1 inch above the chain slider, and this one's 1 3/8 inches. So if I don't have anything to measure with, I just know I don't want it to go above that mark. Or you just break out your handy dandy ruler and do your thing. Okay. Set your chain slack. What we're going to do is the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our tire, pull it all the way back. Okay? And that's always a good place to start without torquing on. All I'm doing is pulling back on the tire so it stops. Then I'm going to take my 32 millimeter, I'm going to come around to the back side, and I'm going to snug this up so that the tire doesn't just move on its own, right? So that's just tight enough that when I push forward, the tire doesn't go anywhere. I didn't torque it down. The other thing this does is it also straightens your spacers and your axle out, so everything kind of semi-aligns. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run both tensioners out until they hit the block. Now you'll see there's a tick mark on the block and there are tick marks on the swing arm, and that's so that you can line them up from one side to the other. So right now we are 1, 2, 3, 4. We're just shy of the 4th tick mark, right? And this is actually, is it touching? Should be touching. Let me make sure that's touching. There we go. So this is touching, and we are 1, 2, 3, we're just shy of the 4th tick mark on the swing arm. So let's go look at the other side. Okay, so over here on the other side, we're looking at 1, 2, 3, and halfway between 3 and 4. So this side is actually a little bit forward. So let's try to match up the tick marks just a little shy. Okay, so now that should be the same as the other side. Because I moved that, and every time you move anything, check your chain tension. Okay, so we moved that, and oh wow, look at what that did. So just moving it that little bit loosened the chain way, way up. Okay, you see now it hits easy and it goes above. So now it's pretty simple. All we're going to do is adjust the tick marks evenly from one side to the other as we pull back on the chain. And every time we make an adjustment or two, we're going to go double check this. I don't think it's going to take much, but if these are close, if I do 1, 2, and then I'm going to flip to the other side and do 1, 2. Right, so now the tick marks are actually all lined up on that side, and tick marks are lined up on that side. Then we're going to double check our chain tension, and I have to push down and pull up, and oh man, that is just a little bit loose, but not bad. It's actually really close to 1 3/8 right there. I don't know if my tick mark shows up good on the camera. Let me throw a tape measure in there. Maybe that'll show up a little better. Now, when I'm measuring this, you're measuring it not from the top and bottom. You're measuring it, pick a spot, either the middle or whatever. I'm measuring it from the bottom because when I push down, it just touches. So when I pull up, we're at 1.5 inches. So it's still a little loose. So we're going to add well, it's actually only 1/4 of a turn. And then I'm going to add 1/4 of a turn to the other side. So let's see what that did to our chain tension. Oh man, now I got to push really hard to get it to touch and come up above. So now I'm not quite going all the way down when I push, and I'm coming up to about that same mark. So I'm going to call that good. Remember, if I measure it from here, then I have to measure it up to here along the bottom, right? But it's as far down as it'll go to as far high as it'll go. So you're yanking to pull it up, you have to shove it to push it down. Okay, so I'm really, really super happy with that. Now we're going to make sure that everything is in alignment. And what I'm talking about in alignment is I want to make sure that the rear sprocket is aimed straight up at the front sprocket. There's a couple ways you can do that. Probably the easiest way is to get this Motion Pro little tool here, and that just hooks on your rear sprocket, and it gives you like a gun sight to aim down to make sure that, again, your rear sprocket aims right at your front sprocket. And looking at that, it looks to me like it aims off to the left just a little bit. So you would have to pull that side of the tire back. Here's another thing, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to actually give it half a turn just so you can see it, but I need to take this off for a second. And I want you also to look at, while I'm doing this, how your sprocket hits the chain. So see how the sprocket is actually on that side of the chain when I spin it, right? And see how right there it's in the middle? I might not actually move this at all. See how now the chain's on that side? Now it's right in the middle. And it's still in the middle. All right, I'm not actually going to change it. I like that. Before I had one of these, that's exactly how I would make sure everything lined up. Can you see how the sprocket doesn't touch here? Let me show you. I can push it this way, right? There's a little give. I can push it that way, right? So the chain isn't trying to bind up on either side. All right, well, I'm super happy with that. Lock our tensioners down, and all I'm going to do is hold, right, I'm going to hold the set bolt, the tensioner, so it doesn't move, and then this little locking nut here I'm going to tighten down. And I'm not going to crank the crap out of it. We're just snugging it. And then do the other side. All right, so we did that without moving anything. And the last thing to do is you're going to tighten down your axle nut to 98 foot-pounds, which is many, many ugga-duggas. Basically, you crank on this until you can lift the whole back tire off. And then I always finish it up with a step. 98 foot-pounds is a lot of foot-pounds. Last couple things and then we're done. The next thing that you guys didn't let me forget was we need to torque down our front sprocket, and that torque spec on this is 23 foot-pounds. And this one's fairly important. Don't over tighten it and ruin those threads, right? Because the output shaft goes into your motor. That's kind of an expensive fix. And obviously don't under torque it as well. I'm going to use a torque wrench for this. If you don't have a torque wrench, you ought to get one. I don't use it for everything, but there are certain parts that I most definitely use it for. This is one of them. And just a real quick, not a tutorial, but maybe a trick. Not everybody gets how this works. Can you see the numbers going up the side? One side says foot-pounds, right? The other side is kilonewtons. We're going to do this in foot-pounds. You see it says 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And the bottom dial has these numbers that go 0, right, up to what should be 5, and then again to 0. Notice that if I turn this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it puts me on the 20 mark. So think of these, the numbers along the side, as your little hand on your clock. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. And these numbers here are your big hand, right? So if I go to 0 and 10, that's 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, okay? So I'm going to set this to 23 foot-pounds, lock the back, and we're just going to do the same way we took it off. We're going to put it on. So I'm going to get that where I can get it. I'm going to step on the rear brake, and I'm going to turn this till it clicks. Oh, there we go. And that's 23 foot-pounds. Is not a lot. And we're done. Everything is changed out. The last little thing that I need to tell everybody about to make sure that you do is once you get this all set up, I want you to go take a nice, easy drive down the road. Make sure everything's good. Hit the back brake, hit the front brake, listen for any weird noises. And once you've done that, and you're sure everything's good and it's not going to fall off, go ahead and take a ride. Again, an easier ride. Don't hammer the crap out of anything just yet. But I want you to put a couple miles on it, 10, 20, 30, 40, whatever. And then I want you to come back and get ready to do this adjustment again. Because again, the initial running in of the chain, you're moving the grease around on the pins, everything's wearing in. And once everything is worn in, your chain tension will stay good longer. But that first, I don't know, 40 miles, everything wears in really quickly, and you're going to want to check it. So make sure you do that before you go out and beat the crap out of your bike. Just get 40 easy miles on it, or if they don't have to be easy miles, but 40 not Supercross miles, and come back and check your chain slack. And I guarantee you're going to have to move it back. You're going to have to move the back sprocket back. You're going to have to re-add some tension to this right here. And that's pretty much it. So that's what I'm going to go do now. I'm going to take this down off the stand and go ride around a little bit and double check my tension. As always, thank you guys for watching me change the chain on my bike again. And yeah, if you guys have any tips or tricks, put them in the comments down below. I'd love to hear what you guys think. All right, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.